I couldn't Zoom. And sometimes in this neighborhood, Comcast goes down. Actually, it went down yesterday in our neighborhood from
Oh,
about noon to about 5 o'clock. In our house, we just live not too far from here. We had no Wi-Fi in our house. I don't know.
I lost power on Thursday
Mhm.
when I was gone. But when I came home, it was on. But all the internet and TVs, everything, I had to reboot everything. So it happens.
So
happens.
we're on streaming right now, and you seem to be the only one on the Zoom, but that's nice.
Well, I can switch over to Facebook.
No. Why don't you stay on Zoom? Because I can talk with you. I can't talk with the people on
Okay.
the streaming. So it's nice to see another face.
know.
And so
Okay.
everything okay? How was your Hanukkah?
Well, it was pleasant. You know, I always have a Hanukkah party, so I missed that.
Yeah.
I always, but other than that, you know, it's in my opinion, it's really for children. And I was able to FaceTime with a few of the children in my life, and they opened their Hanukkah presents on FaceTime so I could watch. And it was, you know, it was everyone, I think, had a nice time as best they could. Rabbi,
Well,
I heard you're moving. Is that true?
Well, yeah, we sold our house and we bought another house where we got two closings on the 23rd. Is that Tuesday? I better.
Oh, good luck.
We sold this house and we bought a house in Emerald Hills. And why are we doing that? People want to know. Listen, this is our neighborhood. We love our neighbors. I love walking to shul, but this neighborhood is so hot right now. We're talking about East Hollywood. And our house is over 60 years old. And and it's a corner lot, and the amount of work required for the landscaping. And quite frankly, there's always something going wrong.
Right.
And the market is so good. So we sold it, and we sold it very quickly, and we got a good price. We found what we consider to be an undervalued townhouse, one story, with basically no yard, just a little bit. The HOA takes care of everything, and it's going to really lower our expenses. The trouble is, I'm going to have to drive on Shabbat, and even though I'm a Reformed Jew, I don't like that, to be honest with you. I love walking.
But you're in a nice Jewish area with lots of.
It's very Jewish. It's very Jewish over there. More Jewish actually than East Hollywood. Here I'm the frummy guy. Over there, I'll be the the not so frummy guy.
You know, I live. You've been to my house.
Yes.
Westlake Village. You've been here. It's. I have one Jewish neighbor in my block.
Yes.
But the community is it's diverse. It's mixed, and it's very pleasant, very nice. But
we looked in Westlake Village. We just didn't find any place that suited us, unfortunately. But we could have ended up your neighbor. But so I think even though it's hard to leave a place you've lived in for 16 years.
It's nice. It's nice to be in a community. Which one are you going to? May I ask? Or
yes, townhouse of Emerald Hills. It's
so you're going to be
backs
off
right
of Sheridan.
You're right off between 40th and 46th.
Yeah, I know exactly.
Just north of Sheridan, backs right up to Emerald Hills Country Club. So we'll look out. We'll see the country. There's a little lake there, and the country club.
Best of everything.
Yeah. Well, when things get back to normal, we'll have you over.
Sure.
Well, so let's get to it. Other people may join us. and there may be people watching on YouTube right now, or what do you call it? FaceTime. Actually, I'm going to go on FaceTime just to see if
Facebook.
Facebook. You're right, Facebook. There we go. I see me chattering away there. Okay, so we begin with our blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Well, this week's Torah portion is Miketz, and it is about, the part that I want to talk about is when when Joseph's brothers appear before him, and there he is sitting on kind of a throne. He's the second most powerful man now in Egypt, right? You know all of the circuitous story, how he got to be the prime minister or vizier or whatever of Egypt, but he's a very powerful man. He's dressed like a proper Egyptian. His name is, now it's no longer Joseph, it's Zaphnath Paneah. He's even got an Egyptian name. Hi, good morning,
Shalom.
Ursula.
Good morning.
He does not speak Hebrew with them. He pretends not to understand Hebrew. They're conversing. He is speaking to them through interpreters. And so what I want to, what I'm going to try and relate this to this week's Torah portion is this question of them standing before him, not knowing it is him. I want to relate this to a contemporary debate within the Jewish community. Okay. Now, the word the line, the verse, the pasuk that I want us to consider today is the following. It is in Genesis chapter 48, verse 8. It says, "Vayakir Yosef et echav vehem lo hikiruhu," which means Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Okay? You remember, they look at him. They didn't know it was Joseph that they were talking to. They thought they were just talking to this very important Egyptian official. Now, the debate that I want to bring up, the contemporary debate within the Jewish community, is this: should we have a unified stance of support for Israel, at least in public, or whether we should publicly air our differences regarding Israel? Okay? That's the question. Every serious Jew supports Israel. Anyone who calls him or herself a Zionist supports the state of Israel, and we are fervently concerned with Israel's survival. We're all in agreement about that. Just as all the political parties in Israel, they all agree with that. How can you not care about Israel's survival? Now, within the state of Israel, there are debates all of the time regarding Israeli policy. Not every Israeli supports every policy that the government, whatever the government might be, issues at a given time. And also in the diaspora, those of us who follow developments in Israel, sometimes we don't agree with a particular policy that the Israeli government is following, even though we love Israel and we are fervently, as I say, fervently concerned about Israel's survival. A lot of the debate that we have within Israel and within the diaspora community is how we interact with the Palestinians in the territories. Some people say that the settlement policy isn't the right thing to do. Okay. Some people say that that what we have to be doing, even though the Palestinians don't do the right thing often, even though they may not be quite ready yet to make a true peace with us, maybe we should be very cautious about building settlements on land or confiscating land where they have lived. So that's the debate. Do we have that debate in public? Should we have that debate in public? Well, there's some people who say that's not the right debate. The debate should be based on that line, that passage that I just read from this week's Torah portion. Miketz. Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. For so many decades, most of Israel's existence, the surrounding nations, the Islamic nations, have not recognized Israel, even though Israel has been always ready to recognize its Arab, the existence and the right to exist of its Arab neighbors. And the question arises, what is preventing peace? Now, a lot of the Arab nations that heretofore haven't recognized Israel said, it's because Israel does not recognize the rights of the Palestinians. When in fact there are Islamic nations that will never, or Islamic organizations and nations that will not recognize Israel's right to exist within any borders. Certainly, that's the case with the Islamic Republic of Iran. They will never recognize that regime will never recognize our right to our land within any borders in the land of Israel. We have Hamas in Gaza, which is a Palestinian group that will not recognize Israel at all under any circumstances. We have Hezbollah in Lebanon, which has thousands and thousands of rockets aimed at Israel, and they good morning, Barbara and Stanley. That under no circumstances, based on some misguided religious principles, will not recognize Israel. So just as Joseph recognized his brothers, but they would not recognize him, we see in this week's Torah portion, in a certain sense, Joseph represents Israel. Joseph, in a lot of ways, can be symbolic of the Jewish people, not just in the current state of affairs, but also historically. Sigmund Freud had an idea that he said that the most basic human conflict was between fathers and sons. You know the story of Laios and Oedipus, right? He said the basic conflict, basic human conflict is between fathers and sons. The Torah knows better. The Torah knows better. The basic human conflict, the worst human conflicts are sibling rivalries, right? Look at the Bible. It's not about fathers and sons fighting each other. It's about brothers fighting each other, right? Cain and Abel, Isaac and Ishmael, Jacob and Esau, and in this week's Torah portion, Joseph and his brothers. The basic, most human conflict is among brothers. Now, what'd you say? Okay, so let's take a look here at Joseph's situation. Joseph had the misfortune of being the youngest brother, the last to arrive, and he's much smaller and physically weaker than his brothers, and we know that his father kind of, I'm downplaying, but his father favored him. And this was to the chagrin, this was to the dismay of the brothers, and the brothers hated him. The brothers saw him as a troublemaker, as maybe arrogant, which, and again, getting back to this idea that Joseph represents the Jewish people, we have been often the smallest people and the people without a lot of power in many situations, especially in the diaspora, and others have seen us as troublemakers. Oh, and have resented this whole idea that we are the chosen ones, right? Oh, you say God loves you more than he loves us. Oh, it was just like Joseph being loved more by his father than the other brothers. And this, so we see that this whole situation with Joseph and his brothers caused his brothers to become angrier at him. And what did they do in the last week's Torah portion? What did they do? They find a way to get rid of him. They talked about killing him, that they didn't. They put him, they take his coat of many colors, they rip it and they put it in blood and they throw him into a dry hole. And conveniently, they don't have to kill him. Conveniently, some Ishmaelites, a caravan, a bunch of Arabs are walking by, they pick him up, they sell him to the Egyptians. He becomes a household slave and they get rid of him. They go, oh, we're fine with him. Now, it's all a lie. We know this. They show the coat of many colors, ripped to pieces, full of animal blood, and they cause their father a great deal of grief, telling him that a wild beast had destroyed Joseph. But they think, we're done with him. We're done with him. This troublemaker. We'll never have to see him again. And they might feel some kind of guilt, but they suppress it, and they begin their life again, this time without Joseph. And so now,
still in Genesis.
Yeah, Genesis chapter 42. Chapter 42, verse 8, Barbara. So now, in this week's Torah portion, we find them standing before Joseph. Vayakir Yosef et Echav vehem lo hikiru. Vayaker Yosef et Echav vehem lo hikiruhu. Joseph recognizes his brothers. They don't recognize him. So again, this is, we can understand the Torah. Oh, we have Susan Nelson watching, and Cappy watching, and Dee watching, and Marlene watching. So we have a nice group on our streaming service as well. So getting back to how we interpret the Torah, we can see the Torah as just a story. We know all of these things that transpired in the story, in the basic story of Joseph. The sibling rivalry, he's thrown into a pit, he's sold into slavery, and through all of this incredible story, he ends up as the prime minister of Egypt. It is so incredible, so unlikely that it probably was true. Sometimes truth is stranger than fiction. I think historically something like that happened. But we also understand everything that happens in the Torah, we also understand on a symbolic level. We have to dig a little deeper. Just that basic story, we call that pshat, the simple story. But we dig deeper, the drasha. When we dig deeper into the story, we see that this is symbolic. Joseph, again, I'm going to reiterate, Joseph symbolizes the Jewish people and our history. Judaism was the first monotheistic religion. We were the first people to declare one God, one indivisible God, incorporeal. Now, we weren't the last monotheistic religion. Out of Judaism came Christianity, and out of Judaism and Christianity came Islam. And they also, just like us, even though we were the first, they, like us, claimed to be descendants of Abraham. In the case of the Christians, in a metaphorically, in the case of the Arabs, in the case especially the Arabs, they're not the only Muslims in the world, incidentally, but they claimed in a literal sense to be like us, to be descendants of Abraham. And so we have sibling rivalry. Just like Joseph and his brothers, there was sibling rivalry between the Jews and the other monotheistic faiths. And again, the Torah is right, Sigmund Freud is wrong. The basic conflict, the most basic and problematic conflict is not between fathers and sons, like Freud said, it's between brothers or siblings. So the leitmotif, I guess we would say, for the last 2,000 years has been that the Jewish people was cast into the role of Joseph. Now, if we look at Jewish history, we see periods of peace and harmony between the Jewish people and the other monotheistic religions, but we also see periods that were very problematic. There were long periods in Spain, and in which Jews and Muslims, and even some Christians to some extent, lived in relative harmony.
Yes.
There was historians of people who study and write about Spanish or Iberian history, call it the conveniencia, There was the Convencia period, in which Jews, Muslims, and Christians lived together in relative harmony. But things did not last. Eventually, that convivencia, that hi, good morning, Betty. It didn't last forever. And there were the blood libels. People came up with crazy conspiracy theories against the Jews. Oh, the Jews caused the Black Plagues. Oh, the Jews were poisoning the wells. The Jews were doing a kind of had weird. They needed the blood of Christians for their matzah. Nutty things came up, and of course there were the pogroms. There were the Crusades. There were the ghettos were established by the church, no less, in the Middle Ages. And out of that, we can just draw a straight line from that medieval period when this sibling rivalry really got going to the Holocaust. There's just a straight line you can draw. So now we have the state of Israel. The state of in 1948 we came back to our ancestral land, and no other people in the world except perhaps the Chinese has had a longer association with a particular land than the Jews. When you think about it, there's no other people on earth that has had a longer association with a particular land than the Jews. The Chinese, maybe 4,000 years. Us, we're about 4,000, over 4,000 years. So now, the sibling rivalry that we have with many of the Islamic countries in the world and Islamic groups continues. Recently, some of the Muslim countries have started to recognize Israel, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But we still have some recalcitrant countries and groups. Iran, for example, the Islamic Republic of Iran will not recognize, just as Joseph's brothers wouldn't recognize him, Iran, at least the contemporary, the current government regime in Tehran will never accept Israel, and neither will Hezbollah or neither will Hamas. And it's not this the conflict that we have with those recalcitrant Islamic countries and groups is not a normal conflict. It's not about borders. Countries will have dust-ups about borders. We own that river. No, you don't. That river belongs to us. That mountain range should belong to us. That goes on and on. But it's not a question of, I don't recognize your right to exist. It's a matter of, in most cases, in most international disputes, it's about something other than the right of one or the other to exist. This is not the case with certain Islamic groups. They have a religiously based opposition to the Jewish people having a state within any borders at all. There are 56 Islamic states in the world and only one Jewish state. And none And, you know, there are about 192 countries represented in the UN. There's no other country in the world whose basic right to exist is ever brought into question, except when it comes to the state of Israel. And just like, and again, just like getting, just like Joseph would recognize his brothers, and they wouldn't recognize him. We still have some countries that will not recognize Israel no matter what. Now, during the last few months and the last few years, we've seen Israel being recognized by certain countries. In the late 70s, early 80s, an agreement was reached between Israel and the largest Arab country population-wise, and that was Egypt. In the 1990s, Jordan. So for a long time, for 20 years, 25 years, we had two countries, and that was very good for Israel. And recently, we've had Bahrain, the United Arab Emirates recognized Israel, Sudan is recognized Israel, and now just this last week we now have Morocco, and I'd love to visit Morocco. Morocco just sounds like a wonderful country. Now, is that because the all of a sudden the Arabs and the Muslims have fallen in love with us? No. What did they say? There's that nations don't have values, they have interests. Have you ever heard that, Stanley? You're a
Yes.
student of it. Nations have no values, they have interests.
Yes.
And it's not that they woke up one day and said, the Jews are really our long lost cousins, which we are. They said it's mostly the Sunni countries. It's the Sunnis who are in the main Arabs who have a long-standing conflict with the Shiites who are in the main Persian, Iranian. And that dispute has really is really bubbled up as the number of a very serious conflict. It too is it too can be understood as a conflict of siblings. If you say all the Muslim brothers, it too is a rivalry between siblings. So as that conflict has become much more prominent, the conflict between us and the Sunnis is not so important. The Sunnis are seeing the Jews as an ally in their fight against Iran. And the biggest Sunni country, or not the biggest Sunni country is actually Egypt, but probably the most significant Sunni country is Saudi Arabia, because Saudi Arabia, although it's not the biggest country in terms of population, because it has the most important holy sites, Mecca and Medina. These are very significant Islamic sites. They are constantly in cooperation with Israel. They may not be able to officially recognize Israel, but because their neighboring countries, the United Arab Emirates and Bahrain, are not going to do anything without Saudi Arabia's wink and permission. The Saudis are very favorably disposed to Israel. And so things have changed, things are changing, but we still have these recalcitrant elements within the the Muslim world, and even among the Palestinians. We have to understand, we have people in the Palestinian community, I believe, who are serious about making peace with us, but we also have elements, very powerful elements within the Palestinian community that really have not come to the realization that Israel is there to stay. Hamas, for example. Yeah, Hamas, for example. It was shocking that they were elected in Gaza, in 2007, something like that. They're just dead set against ever recognizing Israel. We have the Palestinian Authority, which by and large cooperates with Israel on the West Bank, and yet they still honor sometimes, even though they're cooperating with Israel, even though they say they want to make peace with Israel, they still honor terrorists. And some of their educational material in their school systems is not only anti-Israel, it's almost anti-Semitic. It's like, and they really haven't addressed that. Now the question comes up, and the question comes up, and I mentioned it at the very beginning. Those of you who tuned in just a couple of minutes late may not have heard me mention this, and I'd like to discuss this with you. The question that I raised was, should we Jews only present a united front in our support of Israel, never criticizing Israel for any policy, or is it right for us to publicly or express our differences when it comes to Israeli government policy? As I said before, Israel is a lively democracy, and Israelis fight and argue over various Israeli policies. In the diaspora, in America, and sometimes we like to tamp down any criticism of Israel because it might be viewed as giving aid and comfort to our enemies. There are some of us that say, the settlement policy on the West Bank may not be the right thing for Israel. And sometimes, confiscation of Palestinian lands is not right. We don't agree with it. We don't, and there are many Israelis who don't agree with it. There's some Israelis say that, hey, it's there, we ought to take it. All of it is our ancestral land. Let's take it. There are people who are ardent lovers of Israel, committed Jews, fervent Zionists who say, listen, we love Israel, and the main debate is we have to fight for Israel's survival. But being a Zionist means we want to establish a Jewish state. We want a Jewish state that represents Jewish values. When we see any government, especially the Israeli government, sometimes we might say, what you're doing doesn't represent the best of Jewish values. Should we speak up, or should we keep our mouths shut? There are some of us who go, it's not even a matter of Jewish values. It's a matter of Jewish or Israeli security. Now, certainly, there are two issues here, and I'm going to kind of end with this, and then I want to hear your opinions. We have to separate survival from security. Survival is, I think, is a question of Israel's relationship with its neighboring countries. You know, war. There have been more and more. We have peace with the Sunni countries, which is good. We still have a problem with the Shia Muslims, especially Iran, which presents an existential threat to Israel's survival. We have to be careful about that. But more and more, Israel's neighbors are beginning to recognize Israel. Now we got, what, 6, 7 countries, which is very nice. Who would have believed this? 20, 30 years ago, we wouldn't have believed it. Israel's security is a little different. Security is different from survival. Security is being able to live in a safe, happy country. Lebanon is a country that whose survival is not in danger. Lebanon will continue to exist, but security is terrible there. You can't walk out. You can't you can't go to the marketplace. Kids can't go to the store because there is such strife in Lebanon. We see that in Afghanistan. It's a matter of security, not survival. Those countries will survive, but they're horrible places to live. We who love Israel, who will do anything for Israel's survival, say we also care about Israel's security. If Israel does not have good relations with the Palestinians, and there are 3-4 million Palestinians, and we just absorb them into a greater state, and they are angry and feel, that they don't, their right to exist has been denied by us. Is Israel's security going to be enhanced? A lot of us say no, that it's in our interest, even if we don't love the Palestinians, even if it's not a matter of our values, but it's a matter of what's in our interest. Even if the Palestinians are not yet ready to make a true peace with us, we should be very careful about what we're doing. And we should be able to debate this, to be able to criticize a policy here or there of the Israeli government. Is that a good thing? Or should we just go, what's the right thing to do? So I'm going to open it up to discussion now. What do you have to say about it? Yes, Stanley.
If I say something against Israel, nobody cares except Barbara, which is true.
Okay.
No, Israel did this bad. Well, Barbara will say, no. But if the Jewish leaders of the United States say something against Israel, that gives the Arabs ammunition.
That's an argument.
Prejudiced ammunition. So they should temper what they say. It's very, very important. The Jewish leaders. Now, who are the Jewish leaders? You could say the rabbis, but even Rabbi Tops might say something. Yes, but it's not going to make CNN. You understand? Mm-hmm. But if the Jewish politicians say, a senator, a congressman, even the president of the United States, whether before the 20th of January or after the 20th of January.
Mm-hmm.
I have dealt with the Arab states when I was in New York.
Mm-hmm.
They're not to be trusted. They're not to be trusted. So, trust is 99% between individuals and in countries and in trade.
Okay.
I have dealt with them. They're not to be trusted, period. You have to, when you shake hands, you make sure that all fingers are still in your hand. They are put into a terrible situation, the leaders of the Arabs. They can't recognize Israel because they're afraid of their own people will rise up against them and they're out. They're out of power. So Trump made a very bad deal with the trucial states. Recognize Israel. That's great. That's great. But the deal was that they're going to sell them the F-35s.
Yes,
They're
yes.
going to sell them the F-35s. They're not going to have the F-35s land in their country, and it's controlled by the Air Force. They're going to sell it to them, and we're going to teach them how to fly them. We're going to teach them parts. So you can't trust these people. They'll probably sell it to China. They will sell to China. China comes along and says, we'll give you a certain amount of money.
Yeah,
We give you the technology for the F-35.
Yeah.
And then, United States government bought 1,000 F-35s at $112 each. No BOGO.
112 million.
They're not Publix. No
112.
BOGO.
Oh, okay.
But it's nice that we get the money, but it's going to backfire on us.
Interesting.
Gotta
Okay.
be very careful what we do.
Yeah, that is an interest,
And the dealings with them.
yeah, I mean, that is a very, that is an important and very common perception and stand on it, and there's a lot of logic to it. But Marlene, what did you want to say?
Well, I know a few people that live in Israel, and some are Americans who moved there, and some are Sabras or lived there most of their life.
Yeah,
And although I personally think it's every Jewish person's moral responsibility to support Israel, its existence, its survival, for us to pass judgment from here,
yeah,
unless you live there and live with the so-called enemy
yeah,
or adversaries, unless you are fighting every day or afraid every day. I hear stories that nobody would hear, but something that happened in the neighborhood or in the city and so forth. So who are we to pass? I mean, we should lend our support, but how can we dictate policies unless we actually live in Israel and fighting for Israel?
let me ask,
Physically.
yeah,
fighting for-
that I hear that. Now, do we as Jews, I'm just talking as religious Jews, should we, if we use that argument, and I hear that argument a lot, and there's a lot of validity to it, but when we see, do we have the right or a responsibility to lift up our voices from our Jewish values when we see injustices or things that are just not right that are happening outside the United States? Does this mean, if we take your point of view to its logical conclusion, we shouldn't criticize what's happening in Venezuela? We shouldn't, because we don't live there. We shouldn't criticize what's happening in China with its human rights abuse. We shouldn't because you could say, I cannot ever say anything, even though I'm from a distance. I can have no questions. I can raise no questions about government policies anywhere in the world. If South Africa wanted to be an apartheid state, hey, I don't live there. What do I know? And so I hear what you're saying, and it's a dilemma for me. It's a dilemma for me because I never want to give aid and comfort to Israel's enemies. Sometimes I really disagree with something is the Israeli government does. I don't want to give like Stanley says, you don't want to help the enemy. But on the other hand, we see Israelis, and Israelis will criticize America. They'll tell you everything wrong with America.
Oh, yeah.
If you've run it, they have no problem, telling us what's right. And
But
Russia's always saying, "Butt out." This is not, we see some bad stuff going on in Russia, and they go, "It's none of your business. Shut up. You don't live here." And again. And Israel, though, we don't live there. We love Israel. We love Israel so much. And we should we never have an opinion or never raise our voices? I mean, it's a question.
But I didn't mean it that way. I think we have the freedom and the
Yes.
privilege to speak our minds in our country.
Yes.
We all have opinions, but Rabbi and everyone else, action speaks louder than words.
Yes. Yes.
You know what if you see an analogy, if I see a family who is starving,
Yes.
I don't contribute to the food bank. I contribute to the family.
Yeah.
I will bring food to
That's
them or
good.
give them
That's
or
good.
help them. I mean, maybe it's a silly analogy, but
Yes.
I mean, I love Israel, and I would like to go back one day, but
Uh-huh.
quite frankly, I don't know how. Right now we're not going anywhere.
Yes.
But it's a very touchy subject, and
It is.
if
Yeah.
anyone badmouthed Israel, I would come to Israel's defense.
You know what? It's when it comes to criticism, I talked about criticism and last night I talked about chastisement. I talked about how there's a way to criticize. If you watched my sermon last night, there are some people when they start criticizing Israel, I have my little red flags come up in my
Right.
mind. I go, hey, this person is an enemy of Israel, and they don't love Israel. And I know I suspect that this person even questions Israel's right to exist. But then I have my Zionist. I grew up in the Zionist movement. I got my yearbook. On Thursday night, I got a delivery of my yearbook from the year I graduated from high school, and it was a long time ago. And I was in the 12th grade, and they wrote about me in my yearbook. It said, Alan Tufts, this hardworking lad. That starts off like that, so English. This hardworking lad, and it talked about, and it says he belongs to Habonim. They spelt it wrong because they weren't, the editors weren't Jewish. It spelled it with X's and Z's and stuff, and hopes to visit Israel sometime soon. This was a long, long time ago, right? So I've been a Zionist all my life. I've been and it was 3 years after I graduated from high school that I found myself living on a border kibbutz in Israel along the Israeli-Lebanese border. So I've been a Zionist all my life, and I love Israel. And when you love someone or something very much, and you honestly think that they're making a mistake, and nobody likes when you love somebody or love, our country, you keep your mouth shut. You do, and here's the dilemma that I think we American Jews feel. We do not want to give aid and comfort to the enemies of Israel. But if you really are intimately involved in Israel and you are an ardent Zionist and you see something that, again, just my opinion, I don't really want to debate this, but in my opinion, Israel is going to have to learn to live with the Palestinians. The Palestinians are going to have to learn to live with us. But let's not exacerbate the situation down the road where, 20, 30 years from now, we have a situation like they have in the former Yugoslavia, or what existed between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. Let's not have a situation in Israel that resembles Lebanon. I love Israel so much. I kind of would like to see, I know this is just my opinion and I don't want to get into that. I'd like to see the Israelis and the Palestinians have a nice divorce. Like to see them have a nice divorce. You got your deal over there. We got our deal here. And hey, if you mess with us, there's going to be a price to pay. You will not mess with us, but we respect your right to exist and you better respect our, that's how I see it. And when I see the Israeli government, there are those in Israel who just want to take over all of the West Bank. They want a one-state solution.
Yes.
And we're and my question is, and it's not because I love the Palestinians, but it's like, what are you going to do when you're going to bring these 3-4 million Arabs into the Israeli state? What are we going to do with them? They're going to be the majority. And I have that. And I ask those questions, not because I'm an enemy of Israel. I ask those questions because I'm a lover of Israel. And there are Israelis asking the same question. What are we going to do if we make it one state? Now, can an American Jew who, is trying to keep up with what's happening in Israel without giving comfort and aid to Israel's enemies, those who would question Israel's very right to exist, can that American Jew raise up his or her voice and say, I don't think this is the right thing to do, without being called an enemy of Israel or a self-hating Jew or, an enemy, and it's a dilemma. It's a dilemma. Me.
Well, are you suggesting that in the Joseph story that we get some hints about this, about how
Well, yeah,
Margaret
the
seems-
Joseph story, the question that when it says, Vayeker Yosef et Echav vehem lo hikiruhu, that Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. Joseph being Israel, his brothers being representing the surrounding countries. What we see, they are beginning to recognize Israel. And again, Stanley, I agree with you. No country does anything because out of love or values. They do it because it's in their interest. Okay, but it's better than it's better. That's just a human reality. We know that about countries. But they are recognizing for the first time in 70 years, they've said, we're going to send ambassadors. You guys send your ambassadors. We'll have some trade relationships. We're not going to, we're at peace with you. Hey, whatever the reasons are, you don't love me. I don't care, but you want to have peace with me. Great. You recognize me. Good. You don't love me. That's fine. We've come to some arrangement. The Palestinians, the Palestinians, whether we like it or not, just like we're not going to go away, they're not going to go away. Right? They're just not going to go away. We're not going to kill them. We're not going to expel them. It just wouldn't be, that would be just so against Jewish values. Are we going to absorb them? Well, listen, I've been a Zionist all my life. I want a democratic Jewish state, right? If the majority of the people are not Jewish anymore, I'm going, what was this all about? Right? What's it all about? If eventually there's an Arab majority in Israel, I go, So it's not because I love the Palestinians. No, it's because I love the Jews. Maybe I need to recognize them. I shouldn't fall into the same mistake that Joseph's brothers did. Joseph's brothers did not recognize him. The nations have not recognized us. They're beginning to recognize us. Should we somehow and listen, it's very complicated. I don't know what we should do, but do we begin by saying, okay, you exist, you have a right to exist, you have a right to some sort of entity? That's the question that I have.
It's like we have to,
We have to recognize that, and they're not ready yet. Okay, and I will admit that. We don't want to give away the store. They got to smarten up and do the right thing and clean up their act too. But in the meantime, we're holding the power. Do we somehow do it in a way that recognizes them and opens the possibility to them having something, us recognizing them, and they unambiguously recognize us and are willing? So that's the question that I have. Stanley.
Say something.
The only,
Okay. I haven't heard from Ursula. Ursula.
okay.
Okay, thank you. Well, I see, I've been in Israel. I love Israel. I work for Israelis, right now. And I see, coming from South America background. So what I saw is a conflict between Israelis and American Jews.
Yes.
Number one.
Yes.
So Israelis, they feel they are smarter than Jews from the diaspora.
They often think they
That's
are.
what they,
Yes.
is smarter. And for many reasons, one is they are in the front line. So nobody from here, from this continent, understand that sending our own kids to the front line. And,
Yes.
and with the conscience that he may come back or he may not come back, he or she. That's number one. Number two is a family issue. It's a family issue. It's like, brothers and sisters, brothers and brothers, is who is on the top or who is on the bottom.
Yes.
You see, history says when the convivencia existed in Spain,
Yes.
the Arabs were on the top, the Jews were in the middle, and the Christians, it was like
Yes.
Jews were minority, but the Arabs were on the top. So that, they live in convivencia for 7 centuries.
wow.
What happened in 70 years, 70 plus, that we don't have that convivencia? Because Jews in Israel, they want to be in the power position.
Yes. And listen, I make no apology for Jewish power. I'm glad. I would rather Jews have power than not have power, because I've seen the consequences of Jews not having power. Power is good, but how do you use the power?
Oh,
Is your power? I would not compromise Israel's power, and Israel is in a good position now. It's just how you use the power. Do you use the power in a way that comports with your values, and two, is in your long range interest. I think if you use power properly, and with bringing into consideration your values, that your prospects of survival are better. That's my feeling. I think so. It's an interesting question, and it's about and this week's story portion is about recognizing each other. I'm delighted that so many Arab countries are beginning to recognize Israel. You know what they're saying? They said, you know what, these Jews ain't going anywhere. Let's be friends with them. And these Jews have some power. We might as well be their friends. Okay. I hope the Palestinians do that. And I hope the Israelis, and, those Israelis who don't want to ever recognize the Palestinians will, reconsider that position. Okay. I hope this was an interesting discussion. Stanley, you have the last word, and then we're going to dive.
Okay, let's look at it as a Palestinian. The only friends the Palestinians have in the Middle East is Israel.
Okay.
Jordan kicked them out. They've been kicked all over by their own people.
Yes.
That's number one. Number two, they're seeing Israel bloom economically.
Yes.
All they have to do is recognize Israel.
Yes.
The Arab states are such a mess. They can't do nothing about it. I mean, this is just logic. If they do that, they could have a military agreement with Israel. If anybody attacks Palestinians, Israel go to the defense.
Yeah.
These facts
Good idea.
thrown out.
Interesting
If
idea.
if they can come to that conclusion, that all they have to do is recognize Israel as a state, sit down and talk to them, that country will bloom just as big, just as great as Israel.
But
And
isn't
would
that
have two great economic powerhouses in the
absolutely
Middle East?
that was Shimon Peres's vision of the Israelis and the Palestinians doing a commonwealth kind of thing, an economic, and and that precisely that's what's happening. What you're saying is exactly what's happening now among the frontline states. They're going, hey, you know what? It's in our interest. It's not because we love the Jews, but it's not that we love Israel. But you know what? It's good policy for us to make. And listen, long as you're not shooting at me and you want to make peace, I don't care for I'd like the people to love me, but it's more important at least that they accept me.
Yeah.
Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu v'mitzvotav v'hikatef v'tzitzi. Lie, die, 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 die. Lie, die, 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 die. Lie, die, 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 die. Die, die, die. Lie, die, 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 die. Lie, die, 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 die. Lie, die, 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 die. Die, die, die. Die, 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 die. Die, 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 die. Die, 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 die. Die, 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 die. Die, 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 die. Die, 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 die. Die, 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 die. Die, 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 die. Die, 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 die. Die, die, die. Hine ma tovu manayim shevet anim yam Hine matovu manahim. Shevet achim gam yachad. Hine matovu manahim. Shevet achim
Im
gam
gam
yachad.
yachad.
Hine matovu manahim. Shevet achim
Achim gam
yachad.
yachad.
Kol hanishama tel haleya. 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 Esainai Eleharim Meyayin Yavo Ezri Esainai Eleharim Meyayin Yavo Ezri Ezri Meim Adonai Ose Shamayim Baaretz Ezri Meim Adonai Ose Shamayim Baaretz Magadlu Mahasechaya Mehodamku Machshavoteh Magadlu Mahasechaya Mehodamku Machshavoteh Ya la 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 Magadlu Mahasechaya, Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Mehodamku Machshavoteh. Page 192, if you happen to have your Mishkan Tefillah. Matovu Ohalehaya Mishkenotecha Yisrael Matovu Ohalehaya Mishkenotecha Yisrael Matovu Ohalehaya Mishkenotecha Yisrael. Page 196. Barbara, would you read that passage for us?
Yes, thank you. My God, the soul you have given me is pure. You created it, you shaped it, you breathed it into me, and you protect it within me. For as long as my soul is within me, I offer thanks to you, Adonai, my God, and God of my ancestors, sovereign of all creation, source of all creation, sovereign of all souls. Praised are you, Adonai, in whose hand is every living soul and the breath of humankind.
Baruch atah Adonai asher biyado nefesh kutai v'ruach kol basari. Page 198. Let's do it partly in the Hebrew, partly in English. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who has given the mind the ability to distinguish day from night. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who opens the eyes of the blind. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who frees the captive. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who lifts up the fallen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who stretches the earth over the waters.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who strengthens our steps. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who clothes the naked. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who gives strength to the weary. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who removes sleep from the eyes and slumber from the eyelids. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who has made me in the image of God. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who has made me to be free. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who has made me a Jew. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who girds Israel with strength. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, who crowns Israel with glory. Now we turn to page 212. Baruch Shaman V'Hayam Ha'olam Baruch Baruch Shaman V'Hayam Ha'olam Baruch Osei Bereshit Baruch Omer Ve'osei Baruch Ozer Umekayem Baruch Merachem Al Haaret Baruch Sha'amar V'Hayam Ha'olam Baruch atah Adonai Melech Mecholal Batishbachu. Page 215. Ashrei yoshvei beitecha, od yahalu chatzela, Ashrei am shekachalo, Ashrei am she'Adonai Elohav. Happy are those who dwell in your house. They forever praise you. Happy the people who have it so. Happy the people whose God is Adonai. Bottom of page 216. Tehillat Adonai yedebechi, vayevarechu b'sar shem kodsho leolam va'ed, v'anachnu nevarechya me'ata v'ad olam. Hallelujah. My mouth shall utter the praise of Adonai, and all creatures shall bless God's holy name forever and ever. We will bless you, God, now and always. Hallelujah. Page 218. Hallelujah. 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 Hallelujah el bekocho. Hallelujah bekiria uzo. Hallelujah bigvurata. Hallelujah erov good lo. Hallelujah. 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 Take a shofar. Hallelujah. Never will be nor. Hallelujah. Tofu mafu. Hallelujah. Miminin be'ugav. Hallelujah. 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 Silsile Shema. Hallelujah. Silsile Trua. Kol Han Shema Tel Hallelujah. Kol hanshama hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Page 222. Oh, Sheila and Agnes are watching, and that's sweet. Susie, Cappy, and let's see, and another Susie, Marlene, and Dee are watching, and Victor's watching. So we got a lot of people that are with us this morning. Page 222, second paragraph. Shochen ad maharov v'kadosh shemo v'chatuv raninu tzadikim ba'adonai la'yesharim navati hila yesharim tikala u'divrei tzadikim tihit bara u'velashon chasidim titromam u'v'kerev kedushim tihit kadash u'makalot revivot 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 amcha beit Yisrael u'makalot revivot 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 amcha beit Yisrael berina yipar shimcha malkeinu b'chol dor vador berina yipar shimcha malkeinu b'chol dor vador Ishtabach shimcha la'ad malkeinu Ha'el ha'melech ha'gadol ha'kadosh v'shamayim ובארץ. אלחנה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואימותינו, שיר שירה, הלל וזמרה, עוז, הממשלה, נצח, גדולה, גברה, תהילה, תפארת, מלכות, ברכות, והודעות מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני, אל מלך גדול ותשבעות, אל ההודעות, אדון הנפלאות, הבוחר בשירי זמרה מלך אלפי העולמים. יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה, מה דברך חירותי וימליך מלכותי, בחייכון וביומכון, ובחייך בית ישראל. בגולה, בגולה, ובזמן קריבים אמן. יהי שמי רבה מבורך, לעולם ועלמיא, יתברך, יתברך, וישתבח, יתפאר ויתרומם ויתנשא, ויתהדר ויתעלה, ויתעלה, שמי דקודשא בריחו, אלא מכל ברכתה ושירתה, תושבחתה ונחמתה, תהמירן בעלמא, ואמרו Amen. And we rise for the Baruch. Lie, 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 Baruch Adonai Omnivorah Le'olam va'ed. Baruch Adonai Omnivorah Le'olam va'ed. Lie, 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 lie. Lie, 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 lie. Lie, 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 lie. Betty, do you have your Mishkan Tefillah with you?
Yes, I do.
Would you read on page 228 for us?
Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay. All right. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, creator of light and darkness, who makes peace and fashions all things. In mercy, you illuminate the world and those who live upon it. In your goodness, you daily renew creation. How numerous are your works, Adonai. In wisdom, you form them all, filling the earth with your creatures. Be praised, Adonai, our God, for the excellent work of your hands and for the lights you created. May they glorify you. Shine a new light upon Zion, that we all may swiftly mirror its radiance. Praised are you, Adonai, creator of all heavenly lights. Baruch atah Adonai,
Yosef.
Yotzer Hama.
Page 230. והררנו בתורתך, ודבק ליבנו במצוותיך, ויחד לבבינו לאהבה ולרע את שמך, ולא ניפול ולא ניכלם ולא ניכשל לעולם ועד. כי בשם קודשך הגדול והנורא פתחנו, נגילה ונשמחה בישועתך. ברוך אתה אדוני המבקר בנו ישראל באהבה. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. ברוך שם כבוד מלכותו לעולם ועד. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם. בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, ושרתם לו על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובישעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים לחיות לכם, כי אני אדוני אלוהיכם. Amen. Page 240. מי כמוך חיילים אדוני, מי כמוך נהדר בקודש, נורא דהילות אוסף אלה, נורא דהילות אוסף אלה, שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים, בשמך על שפת הים יחד כולם, הודו והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. אור ישראל בעזרת ישראל, ובטחנו ממך Yehuda veYisrael. Go'aleinu Adonai Tzvot Shemo Kedosh Yisrael. Baruch atah
Adonai.
Ga'al Yisrael.
Page 200.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu Kimoteinu, Elohei Abraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, Elohei Leah, Ha'el Gadol HaGibor HaTorah, Elem Yod. חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואמהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם, למען שמו באהבה, מלך עוזר
Moshiach Umod.
אתה, אדוני, מגן אברהם, עזרת שרה, אתה גיבור לעולם חיי מי, אתה רם, גיבור רוח ומרעיד השש, מכלכל חיים בחסד, וחיי מתים ברחמים. נטובים ורופא ומכיר הזכות ומקיים אותו משני העפר על גיבורו ומדומה מלך מלכים ומחיה ומצליח ישועה נאמן אתה לחיות מתים. ברוך אתה אדוני קדש את שמך בעולם מקישים אותו בשמי מרום ככתוב על יד נביאיך וכרזה אל זה ויאמר קדוש 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 אדוני צבאות מלך כל הארץ כבודו אדיר אדירנו אדוני אדוננו מה אדיר שמך בכל הארץ ברוך כבוד אדוני ממקום אחד הוא אלוהינו הוא אבינו הוא מלכנו הוא מושיענו הוא ישוע רחמיו לעיני כל חי אני אדוני אלוהיכם ימלוך אדוני לעולם אלוהי ציון לדור ודור לדור ודור נגיד לך ולנצח נצח ושיבחך אלוהינו מדינו לא לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני האל הקדוש. It's the Ursula. Would you mind reading at the top of page 251?
Would you
No,
tell me the beginning? The beginning.
Oh, I'm sorry. You have the, yes.
But I
It
can
goes,
find it if you tell me the beginning.
We are a people.
Oh, okay. We are. Right.
She is a little small.
She's got a different version. It's just a different pagination.
Okay.
Did you find it?
No, we are the people. We are.
Yes, that's right. We are a people. Well,
It
let's
should be here, but
right after Vishamru. We are a people. Let's read it together. We are a people in whom the past endures, in whom the present is inconceivable without moments gone by. The Exodus lasted a moment enduring forever. What happened once upon a time happens at all time.
Wow, that's a statement.
Boy, it's almost quantum mechanics.
Yes,
know?
it is.
It's happening. Everything that ever happened, everything that will happen. It's all happening at once.
Mhm. Wow.
Einstein was right. There's space and time are really
Just
don't
blended
exist.
together.
They
Just-
don't really exist. Yismichu b'malchutecha shomrei 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 Shabbat v'korei onei Shabbat. Yismichu b'malchutecha shomrei 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 Shabbat v'korei onei Shabbat. Mekadeshei Shevi Shabbat Kulam Yisbeu Vayitangu Mituvecha Shabbat Yismichu B'malchutecha Shomrei 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 Shabbat V'korei Onei Shabbat Ashvihi Ratzita bo kidashto Shabbat Kemdat yaminoto karata Shabbat Yismichu v'malchutecha Shomrei 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 Shabbat V'korei Onei Shabbat Zecher Lamase Bareshi Shabbat Zecher Lamase Bareshi Shabbat Ayesmichu B'malchutecha Shomrei 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 Shabbat V'korei Onei Shabbat. Page 253. You know, Ursula, if you want to get a copy, I'll lend you one of these if you come in sometime. So we're all doing the same prayers. We just all should be on the same page.
I found it finally. But I put a note just in case next time I'll be ready.
Any of you who want to borrow, it'll be until the end of COVID. If you want to borrow one of these, I'll make sure that you get it.
I will stop by this week.
Oh, good. Just let me know when you're coming, okay? And I'll be here.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's go to page 255 and let's read together at the bottom of the page. On this holy Shabbat, may we draw nearer to life, to peace, and to joy. May we find true rest, holiness in our deeds, worth in our study of Torah. Let us feed on the love of goodness. Let us drink from the love of goodness, restrain our thirst for excess, and cleanse our hearts to serve life well. On this holy Shabbat, may we draw nearer in life, in peace, and in joy. Baruch atah Adonai she'otcha levarcha v'yara na'avod. Modim anachnu lach, she'atah hu Adonai Eloheinu ve'Elohei avotenu v'imotenu le'olam ve'ed. Page 256. We acknowledge with thanks that you are our Adonai, are our God, God of our ancestors forever. You are the rock of our lives and the shield of our salvation in every generation. Let us thank you and praise you for our lives which are in your hand, for our souls which are in your care, for your miracles that we experience every day, and for your wondrous deeds and favors at every time of day, evening, morning.
O good one whose mercies never end,
Never
O
end.
compassionate one whose kindness never fails.
Kindness never
We
fails.
forever put our hope in you. For
our
all
hope in
these
you.
things, O sovereign, let your name be
Sovereign.
forever praised and blessed.
Forever praised and
O
blessed.
God, our Redeemer and Helper, let all who
Redeemer and
live
Helper.
affirm you and praise your name
Yeah,
in truth.
praise your name in truth.
Blessed are you,
Blessed are you.
Adonai. Your
name
name
is
is
good.
goodness, and you are worthy of thanksgiving. Baruch
Thank
atah
you.
Adonai.
Adonai.
Atov shimcha lachana lehodo. Sim, 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 shalom. Sim shalom tova uvracha. Sim, sim, shalom tova uvracha. Vehen v'chesed v'rachamim aleinu el kol Yisrael amen. Barchenu yotzreinu kulanu kechad beor panecha. Sim,
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 shalom, sim, shalom tova uvracha. Sim, 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 shalom tova uvracha. Baruch atah Adonai, hamevarech et amo Yisrael b'shalom. We always end the tefillah with a prayer for peace. Shalom Rav. In the evening prayers, we sing Shalom Rav Al Yisrael. It's a prayer about peace. And we always say Sim Shalom in the morning. The whole Torah exists for peace. And this week's Torah portion, in my estimation, Miketz, holds one of the secrets of peace. It's so simple and yet so difficult. We read Vayaker Yosef et Echav vehem lo hikiruhu. Joseph recognized his brothers and they did not recognize him. You know, almost all of the conflicts in the world, when you think about it, whether they're on a international level, one country fighting another, or fights in a family, or arguments in an institution, almost all of them can be traced to somebody not recognizing, not hearing someone else. I've taken many courses in psychology, many of them. And I remember the first course I took in psychology was a course in industrial psychology, very practical course. This was back in Vancouver. And we looked at, I remember we looked at labor relations. And there were studies done about strikes. You know, strikes are very destructive. Nobody really wins the strike. The time that the workers are out of work, you know, and their loss of wages, whatever increases they get, seldom. It takes years and years for them to make up those months that they're on strike. And the company obviously loses too. And so there was a study done. And this, look at this course I took was, oh my goodness, wow, over 40 years ago. So I'm not up on all of the studies, but there was a study done in the 1940s, the 1950s. It was a class, I can't remember what the details of it, but it went something like this. They looked into why do people go on strike? Well, you go, well, they want more money. Yeah, that's always an issue. They want better benefits. Yes, they want better conditions to work under. Yes, those are all issues. And they have to be dealt with. There's no question. And people will go on strike for those things. But the thing that pushes a union or a group of workers to go on strike more often than not is when they think that the company does not listen to them.
when they feel ignored and unvalued, unrecognized in a sense by the company. You know, when a company can't afford to give the workers a raise, sometimes the business can't. You know, business isn't that good. Gee, fellas, we'd like to give you a raise, but you know, we just don't have the business now. You know, workers will understand that. You know, if the bosses take a little cut or, you know, forego a raise, and if they feel like where everybody's in it together, they're less likely to go on strike. But when they feel that they're not recognized and not valued and not listened to, that, according to these industrial psychologists who studied the phenomenon of strikes, said this pushes them over the edge. And I think this is what happens. We argue among ourselves in our families about this or that, you know. Mom always loved you more. I don't know, whatever it is. Or, you know, you're the little one, you were the spoiled one, or you were the oldest and you were the princess and okay, whatever. We can argue about all sorts of things. People argue after elderly parents pass away. They will argue about the inheritance, you know, over a little knick-knack that doesn't even amount to much. It's not about the knick-knack. It's not about the birth order. It's people not feeling they were recognized, that they were not valued, and they weren't listened to. You know, all of the strife that we have in society, whether, you know, it's Black Lives Matter or whether it is the white working class people who so fervently supported President Trump, you know, and sometimes people on the other side can't understand why. It was because they didn't feel like they were valued. They didn't feel like they were listened to. And isn't that they weren't recognized. This week's Torah portion talks about the brothers not recognizing Joseph. If we, you know, if we just stop and listen to each other, we don't always have to agree, but if we listen to each other, value each other's opinions, that's a start to be recognized. That would go a long way to making peace in this world. You know, a little giving each other a little dignity, a little bit of respect. Wouldn't that, I think so, and countries go to go to war because of loss of respect and what they considered the loss of dignity. And, you know, so let's close our eyes for a few moments. And let's meditate on the ability to respect others, to listen to others, to respect the dignity of others. We can't always give people what they want. But can we give each other dignity and recognize each other's or our common humanity? Oh, say shalom bimromav. Say shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Ve'imaru. Imaru. Amen. Say shalom. Say shalom. Shalom aleinu. Ve'al kol Yisrael. Say shalom, say shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. Say shalom,
Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh Shalom, Yaseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. V'maru. Amen. We now turn to page 586, or somewhere, Ursula, somewhere in your book,
Yes.
for the Aleinu, and we rise.
She has the other quote.
ולא שמענו במשפחות האדמה, שלא שמו חלקנו כהם, וגורלנו ככל הענף, ומשתחווים הקדוש ברוך הוא נאמר, והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא, ביום ההוא, יהיה אדוני אחד, ושמו אחד. Cornerstone. Yitgadal v'yitgadash Shemira. V'yalma devarach Yerutei v'yamlich malchut. V'chaychon v'yamichon. V'chayedechal Beit Yisrael. Agalav izman karib imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevarach le'olam u'lamei l'maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitpa'ar. Yitadar v'yitalei v'yitalal shmei t'kushat rihu le'elam inkom berchata v'shirata tush b'chata v'nechamata damiran v'alma v'imru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shamaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. Say shalom b'imromav u'yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael. V'imru. Amen. Ah, boy. Let's see. Closing hymn. Well, we need a good, let's do something a little different today.
Okay.
I don't,
I got it.
what do you
Jingle
have? What?
Jingle bells.
She said
Jingle bells.
I couldn't help it. I apologize.
That's funny. You
You
know,
want to see what my yearbook said about me, Rabbi?
what did your yearbook say about you?
I was the class wit.
Oh, the class wit.
And my father misinterpreted that. He says, they're calling you a half-wit, Marlene. Your friends are getting... I says, no, Daddy. I'm not kidding. I'm not kidding.
Yeah. I didn't tell you everything that it said about me in my yearbook. You know, I went to King George Secondary. It was named after King George V. And I guess we had a little bit of that English schoolboy stuff going on still. And, you know, they said Alan is a hardworking lad, you know, right there, you know, that's what he wrote, a hardworking lad who, but there was, and wants to go to Israel and all that. So it's, and it said, he giddily remembers the time when students took the hinges out of Mr. Tate's door. Now, let me tell you what happened. We were always very respectful to our teachers. We weren't disrespectful in a verbal way, but some of the pranks that were played on teachers were almost cruel.
I mean, and funny, and they were kind of clever. Well, Mr. Tate, we had a love-hate relationship with Mr. Tate, the science teacher. We had these heavy oak doors. So let me tell you about the hinges. So one day he's coming in and he's unlocking his room, and a lot of the students had gathered in the hallway, just, to see what would happen. He had no idea, but people had removed the hinges from his door. The oak door. So poor Mr. Tate, he opens up the door and the door keeps coming. And it falls off. It didn't hurt him. It didn't hurt him. But the door just sort of gently fell on him. We all came and boosted it up. But that was the type of thing we did. And of course, nobody ever admitted to doing it. I only said I witnessed it. I giddily remembered the time when the hinges in Mr. Tate's door were removed, mysteriously removed. So,
That's big. I impersonated teachers.
Oh, you impersonated teachers.
I am a very good mimic. I can mimic almost anybody. It's different than an impersonation, but
Oh, yeah.
and I did it in front of the teacher.
Oh, really? What did you do?
Well, you didn't know the teachers, but we had I did it in a class play and a class talent thing, and I think the meanest teacher of all laughed the hardest.
Yeah.
The
Well,
meanest one
Mr.
of all laughed the hardest. So it was all in good fun.
Yeah,
But-
we did this. Mr. Tate had a sense of humor. He used to slick down his hair and he wore bow ties. So one time he came to class and everybody in class had slicked down hair and bow ties. He looked up, started laughing. But we were all very respectful. Yes, sir. Yes, we're ready to start learning. Yeah, so he was, poor Mr. Tate, he was the target of many pranks. Yeah, we loved him, but anyway. So, Magadlu Masechaya Meodamku Machavotecha Magadlu Masechaya Meodamku Machavotecha. I shared with you that story because I never want any of you to think that your rabbi was such a perfect, well-behaved child, because I was anything but that. I was a respectful child. I didn't get into any serious trouble, but
You and Marilyn moving this week? Is this?
yes, we sold our house on 15th Avenue and we bought a place in Emerald Hills, a little townhouse. And the reason we did it, we love this neighborhood. We love our hood, as we say, is East Hollywood, and we're going to be sorry to leave it, East Hollywood and Hallandale. But the market is very good right now. Sometimes you make a financial decision. Our house, I think, is overpriced, to be honest with you, but someone was willing to pay. We found a nice little townhouse in Emerald Hills, and it's much less maintenance.
That's a biggie.
And the thing that I have very nice neighbors. We love our neighbors. We've had some of the same neighbors for 16 years. And I'm going to be sorry to miss them. But our house is over 60 years old and there's always something going wrong with it. And younger people are buying it. We've really fixed it up and made it nice. But it's high maintenance. It's a corner lot, a lot of landscaping. And now we're going to have an HOA. We have a little a little piece of lawn. They cut it for us. It backs onto a golf course, and it's
Mm.
pretty. And so that's why we did it. When people hear the rabbis moving, they go, "Oh my goodness, what's happening?" It's no, it's not a.
It's
it-
time.
it's time. Sometimes you just have to make a decision, and we're sad, and we're happy. We're looking forward to a new situation. We don't have a pool, and we're moving into a community with a swimming pool. That's nice, and a little place to work out, and we actually. There one congregant, Fran Savalov, she lives there, and we're very friendly with, and we're not with Fran, and we're not very far from Ellen Walker, and we're actually very close to where Dodie White and Bob live. So,
Not too far from where you'll be, Barbara.
Yeah,
That's
well, I'm moving in January to Hillcrest and
yeah.
I
So,
have my place and I have boxes all over the
oh
place now.
God, we're up to our.
I'm
we're up to our-
apologizing to all the people I don't call back lately.
Are
between-
you buying? Are you
Yes,
buying?
I'm buying in Hillcrest in the 4400 building on the
Oh,
sixth
very
floor.
nice. Well,
I'm-
you'll have maybe, you're moving in January.
Yeah, January,
Okay.
around inauguration day.
So
that week.
this Tuesday, is that the 23rd? The
The
Tuesday?
20th, January 20th, I'm moving.
No, this Tuesday's the 23rd.
Oh,
22nd,
I think so, yes,
So-
yes.
22nd.
We have two closings. We're doing both. The amount of paperwork, as
Yes.
you know, to sell a house and buy a house, it drives, and then we had an interview with the HOA. And
Yes.
To see if you qualify.
to see if
Yes.
we were nice enough people
To let in.
to let it. And so we had our interview, and then transferring. We're not going to be able to move for another week. We're not going to move until I think the 29th of this month. So we're actually going to be paying rent.
Yeah.
I'm doing something
In the
like that
house that
too.
we've owned up to.
Yes,
Yeah, we
yes,
have
same here.
You got the same thing. We
Yes.
have a post closing. So we're going to pay them $100 a day to stay in our
Ah.
house.
Similar.
And then you got to, and so you got to, you got the FPL, and then you want to have a Wi-Fi in the place that you go. You want to have cable, you got to have, all these,
All that
so
stuff.
many things to close down, to open up, packing. And you don't want to pack up all your stuff, too early.
Yes, right.
Oh, I need that pan. Where's that pan? Oh,
Yes,
it's in that box. You
yes.
want to
That's
time
what we're
it just
doing.
right. You don't want to live too long out of boxes. So
Yeah.
it's so complicated, but
It's a mess. Well, I also, the other couple days ago, I had to bring all my papers,
yes.
my application to be approved over to Hillcrest. And I met just for a second, I met the president and he informed me that he lives on my floor.
Oh,
So
no.
I said, okay, I won't forget you and I'll follow every rule,
Is his name Sam?
Yes, it is. Yes.
I know Sam.
Oh, okay. Well, he told me he lives on the sixth floor where I'm buying.
Oh,
And I said, I won't forget your name because my last name is Samuel. So I
There
will.
you
Yeah. And so, yeah, we're figuring it all out. And also yesterday, Stanley said, where are our drinking glasses?
Yeah.
I said, oh, we have
We're-
to.
Come up.
So, and then you got to throw out a lot of stuff and you go,
Oh, oh,
so you
yeah.
got to downside and you go, why am I holding on to this? A little bit of a sentimental value, but I have 5 things from that period or that, trip or whatever. I really should just hold on to one thing, but what am I going to throw away? It's hard.
Yeah.
So,
You're
and-
leaving
but-
me.
but
You're
it's a
leaving
good,
me here. You're
it-
leaving me in East Hollywood. I'm gonna miss you.
So
I looked in your
Emery
neighborhood, I
Hills-
just didn't find anything.
Emery Hills is close by to me too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, I'll be
right
closer. I'll be close. Yes, I'll be closer to
Closer.
Ursula.
You'll be
I'll
closer.
be in walking distance practically to Ursula.
Yeah.
The Barbara.
Okay. If you have a libation of some sort,
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam borei peri haaretz. Amen. Ah, the pause that refreshes.
Good luck to you, Rabbi.
Huh?
Good luck.
Ah, thank you. Under normal conditions, I'd have a Chanukah bayit and have everybody over, put my mezuzah up.
Yeah,
Things are a little bit strange these days.
yeah.
Okay,
I made a challah last night.
you made a challah? Oh, yours looks much better than my store
You're
bought.
very welcome.
Oh, gee, that looks good. Okay, Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech olam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Very good.
Rabbi,
Yes.
the funniest prank I ever heard, I actually read it, between Scott and Mark Kelly. Mark Kelly is now senator from Arizona.
Arizona.
Scott, they're both astronauts. They both were at the International Space Station up
Uh-huh.
there. And it was Scott's turn. He was up there for a year. Mark had the idea of setting up a gorilla suit. But Mark was working for NASA in Houston, and every morning Scott had to have a Zoom with Houston to get
Yes.
instructions to talk to him every morning. So they set up the gorilla suit, and Mark said up to his brother Scott. Scott put the gorilla suit on. He put up the lake at Houston, and Houston seeing a gorilla up there in the International Space Station. Now that's funny. Now that's funny. The funniest part of it, after that, he went into the Russian sector of it, and it scared them to death. That's the funniest prank I ever read about.
You know what I think it would be cool to like do an ET costume or an alien costume.
Yes.
What if Houston tuned in one day and everybody's dressed like, you know, it's some kind of weird alien?
Aliens.
Earth,
That was
You
the
know,
funniest.
Earthlings,
I ever read
surrender.
about.
There's no use resisting.
Yeah.
Lead us to your leader.
Yes. Considerably. Well, everyone have a good day.
That's funny.
Good day, everyone.
Okay, good Shabbos, everyone. I love you all.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Oh, by the way, you know, Tuesday, I'm not going to be doing, because I'm doing closings. I'm not.
Oh,
gonna be
my
able-
gosh. All the
So-
best.
But I will be doing Minion on Friday and
Thursday.
on Thursday, and we'll see you soon. Some of our programs, I'm not teaching on Wednesdays. I think the cantor is. Well, I'm going to pick things up again on the 6th of January, and of course that would be Wednesday, my Talmud class, and of course we still have Friday and Saturday.
Cantor's
services.
having class on Thursday night,
Oh, is he? Okay.
But
Is
not
that,
this
is that
Thursday.
Christmas or Christmas Eve?
Christmas Eve,
Yeah,
but I
it's
think the
Christmas Eve.
following week, I don't think he's going to be there
Yeah.
on New Year's.
Yeah. And he's a New Year's baby or,
I know.
Yeah,
or,
it's his birthday.
or a tax deduction. I don't know. Okay, everybody. We'll
Okay.
see you